press room to the courtroom to the halls of Congress, Joe Scarborough has seen it all. Welcome to Scarborough Country.
"14 Syrians boarded Flight 327. The FBI concluded they were a group of musicians traveling together. But as you've heard, some passengers say they engaged in suspicious activity on that flight, including congregating in groups and standing in unison as the plane was about to land. We aren't here tonight to draw any conclusions about the specific facts of this case, but to ask questions that are raised by this incident. Joining us tonight to do that is aviation expert Michael Boyd. We also have counter-terror expert and former State Department official Larry Johnson. And we have Steve Pomerantz. He's a former assistant director of the FBI and a former chief of its counterterrorism unit. Gentlemen, thank you all for being with us tonight. Steve, let me ask you first, what happened here?
Well, you're struck by a couple of things, Joe. First of all, it's clearly, I can easily understand the Jacobsen's reaction to this kind of series of events, given the recent history. But I'm also struck by two other things. One is, of course, that nothing happened. We can talk about suspicious behavior, we can talk about all these activities, but the bottom line is nothing occurred on that flight. That's the second thing. Thirdly, I'm struck by the fact that the FBI did turn out. There seemed to be appropriate and proper response, and they did what sounds to me like a very thorough, exhaustive investigation, and during the course of which nobody was charged with a crime, nobody was even detained, which tells me that these people were here legally, legitimately, had official and appropriate and proper documentation, because as you know, for the last few years in particular, the FBI has not been reluctant to detain people who are here in any way illegally, whether they're out of status or whether they have false documentation. That didn't happen in this case. I think Pete Williams' telling of events was enlightening and illuminating. I think it sounds to me like this is one of those false alarms that are occurring, understandably and with greater frequency and raising more concern, but nevertheless they turn out to be, to all appearances, and false alarms.
Larry Johnson, let me bring you in here. Do you believe it could have possibly been recon work?
It could have been. I mean, you know, we just don't know. Instead of trying to predict what it is that they're doing, what we ought to be looking at is asking the question, are we doing everything we can to prevent acts of terrorism on board aircraft?
And what's the answer to that question?
I think we've moved in the right direction. We still have one gap left that's significant on board in flight that was highlighted by these gentlemen. If you recall, back in December of 1994, Ramzi Youssef, who bombed the First World Trade Center, was perfecting and doing the planning for an operation to blow up 12 jumbo jets. It was called Project Bojinka, and he did a test run on board a Philippine airline flight where he took the components for a bomb. The actual explosive was in a liquid bottle that looked like contact cleansing solution, a bag of cotton that was actually gun cotton, a Casio data watch, 2 9-volt batteries, and a light bulb that would go into the dashboard of a car. He got on board the plane and built that device into the lavatory, took it back, put it under his seat, got off the plane, someone else got on board, plane took off, and it exploded in flight. So one of the gaps that's still in place is that we have not come up with an effective detector at screening checkpoints for liquid explosives.
And Mike Boyd, we also heard, of course, a story from the Jacobsens about how one of these gentlemen went into the lavatory with a McDonald's bag. It was left in there. Others would go in, come out. I mean, it sounds certainly like it could have possibly been a dry run. What's your conclusion?
Well, whether you believe these people or not, that's not the issue. The real point of it is dry runs are probably being made. We know that the 9/11 terrorists scoped out Boston Logan Airport for months. We know they had dry runs. So whether or not this latest story is legit or just people who panicked isn't really the issue. I think, as the other two gentlemen brought up, we do have a problem. And we had a 20-year-old kid who breached security doing exactly, in a dry run, if you will, what this terrorist did on Philippine Airlines.
Michael, recount that story, if you will, about the box cutters.
Well, what happened was a 20-year-old kid named Nathaniel Heatwall breached security several times by getting things onto a Southwest Airlines or several Southwest Airlines airplanes. He sent emails to the TSA to tell them about it. And when that was discovered, the only thing really that happened was the head of the TSA, Admiral Loy, got kicked upstairs. We've heard nothing more about it. But what this issue of bringing things on airplanes, either from the ramp side or from above wing, which would be a passenger, that's very true. We haven't looked at that, and until we do, until we get the kind of expertise we need, which we're a long way from, to do that, we're still going to be at risk, regardless of what happened on Northwest 327.
You know, actor James Woods was actually on a flight on August 1st, 2001, when he saw 4 men that he said were behaving suspiciously. Their behavior was so strange that he thought they were going to hijack the plane. He told the flight attendant and the first officer. They eventually filed reports with the FAA, but after the attacks of September 11th, Woods called the FBI to tell them about the incident, and he later found out that 4 men on his flight were on board Flight 77 and 175 on 9/11. So I guess a lot of people out there, Steve, may be asking, does it really matter that they all checked out, that none had red flags in their records, that possibly these gentlemen, or not just these gentlemen, let's generalize it, say that these dry runs are going on out there and the system's not doing enough to step in and protect us?
Well, the system is never going to protect us to 100% level. That's just not possible. I think I agree with Larry, I agree with Michael. I think the system is certainly better than it was. It's not perfect. The fact that these individuals may check out don't mean that the next batch won't check out. This is just something that's it's a continual process. We're certainly much better at it than we were prior to September 11th, but we're not where we need to be, and we're never going to be at 100%. It's just not possible.
You know, the New York Times is reporting that, this is unbelievable too, that air marshals actually have a dress code that requires, quote, neatly trimmed hair, no beards, suit or sports coat, and dress pants and dress shoes. Larry Johnson, how safe can we be when just about anybody can spot an air marshal on a flight full of vacationers who may be in flip-flops or short pants or blue jeans? Can you believe we have a dress code for air marshals?
The good news is they still look like businessmen or businesswomen who are traveling. So some people think they're easy to spot, but generally they're not as easy to spot. I really don't think we should put a lot of information out about what they're doing and how they're doing it. One thing we know, Joe, is that in the past when you've used security measures and people have done dry runs, the mere presence of security measures ends up deterring them. We saw during the first Gulf War, for example, there were plans by Saddam to try to bomb an airport in Athens, and the fellow tasked with doing that came back and said, no, we can't do it because of the security. So they're going to do dry, if I'm a bad guy, I have to do a dry run, I have to collect intelligence and do a target study, but when I find that there's security measures in place that I'm going to have to confront, that could potentially deter me. So I think it's more important that we focus upon what we can do proactively to deter this behavior as opposed to trying to be mind readers to figure out who's the bad guy.
Mike Boyd, one final question. Give it to me in 30 seconds or less if you can. Are we safer today in the skies than we were on September 11th?
I think that's like saying on September 11th we were 500 feet underwater, now we're 300 feet underwater. No, I really don't. I mean, we have a TSA that's a total shambles, where we have major problems with screeners. We really are just looking for pointy objects. Our airports have no mitigation or contingency plans. All they do is evacuate the terminal. We have film shield bags that can get through with almost anything in them. Our perimeters are wide open. The ramps are wide open. No, I don't really think we're anywhere near as safe as we need to be. Frankly, we need to disassemble the TSA and put in a professional security organization. When you have port security run by the former press secretary to the Secretary of Transportation, trust me, we don't have good security.